Video D2: Costs in the Short Run. Every firm needs to understand its production processes, the many coordinated actions needed to create goods and services. Beyond this, firms must also understand the costs of all of these actions. To think about the full opportunity costs of the production process, it is useful to consider both the cash outlays, or what we call explicit costs, which are also called sometimes accounting costs. But the full opportunity cost of a firm's production process includes not only their cash outlays or their explicit costs, but also the return that the firm could gain from renting out or otherwise using things like the real estate that it owns, equipment like vehicles and machinery, and buildings which could be rented or put to another use. The return on these other uses is termed an implicit cost. To capture the full opportunity costs of the production process, we use the term economic cost to include all of these explicit and implicit costs of production. In using economic costs for decision making, we frequently switch between the ideas of total cost, marginal cost, and the average cost per unit of producing goods or services. In fact, we use these concepts so frequently that we have abbreviations for them that we use almost all the time. TC for total cost, MC for marginal cost, and AC for the total cost of production. The marginal cost is defined very much like marginal productivity, that this is the additional total cost when now one more unit is produced. Average cost is going to be the total cost of production divided by the total number of units that are produced. And when we refer to total costs, we're simply talking about the total of all of the economic costs, the implicit plus the explicit costs. As an example, let's think about the full economic costs for a medical imaging company to provide scans. For example, we're thinking of something like X-rays or CAT scans or MRI scans. Let's start with a table, and let's look at, on a per-day basis, the number of scans that this firm provides. Let's start with 0 scans and go up to 10 scans, 20, 30, 40, and 50 scans per day, for example. Let's suppose the total costs of providing these scans start at $500 before anything has been provided. That's going to be providing the building, the equipment, the X-ray or MRI machine in the first place. We don't have anybody working yet, so we haven't provided any scans. Now we can have somebody working, maybe one person, for part of the day, and we're up to $600 as our cost for this day. And then perhaps for $720 of total costs, we can provide 20 scans a day. Let's let that go up to $870 of total costs and 30 scans per day. $1,120 for 40 scans a day. And let's suppose that the costs are $1,500 for a day, but we can provide 50 scans during that period of time. Now let's think about the marginal costs of production. That is, the additional cost for each new scan that is produced. Well, marginal cost is going to be the change in the total costs divided by the change in quantity. And we're going to express that in terms of $1 per X-ray or $1 per unit. Again, before we've provided anything, we have no marginal costs. But now if we look between an output of 0 and an output of 10, it has cost us an additional $100 per day. So applying this as a formula, we have 600 minus 500. We have 10 scans that we've produced now. So our marginal cost is going to be $60 per scan. Let's now look at the average cost of production, or the total cost divided by quantity. This will also be a certain number of dollars per unit, but now it's representing all of the costs, not just the costs of the next unit. Before we've produced anything, we don't have an applicable concept to work with, but now once we've produced 10 units, we have 600 divided by 10, or we're going to have an average cost of $60 per unit. And if we keep going, we have 720 divided by 20, and that's going to give us $36 per unit. And if you keep doing the math coming down, we have $29, $28, but now the average cost starts heading back up because our marginal cost exceeded our previous average cost, bringing our average cost back up. We can graph both the total cost of production as a total number of dollars against quantity. We're going to go up to 50 as our total quantity per day. 1, 2, 3, 4 hash marks starting at 10. Our total cost tops out at $1,500. Let's put in 1,000 and also 500. And we can plot our total costs now that we start at 500 before there's been any production at all. And now we move up to 600. Then we move to 720, 870, 1120, and all the way up to 1500. And when we're finished with this, we find that our total cost is starting to increase per unit. We can look explicitly at not only those marginal costs, but also the average cost per unit. In a separate graph. If we start with 50 on the axis and put in 25, we'll sketch quantity, again going out to 50, and we'll do 10, 20, 30, and 40 again. Let's start with those marginal costs we were talking about. Now we're going to start at a quantity of 10. And at a quantity of 10, our marginal costs are also going to be 10. They go up just a little bit to 12, and then up to 15, up to 25, and up to 38. This upward sloping marginal cost curve is also showing diminishing returns, just like we had with the decreasing marginal product. Now let's go and graph the average cost. Again, starting at an output of 10, our average cost starts really high because we haven't yet covered the overhead of renting the building and renting the equipment. We're going to slowly start seeing a decrease in average cost as we move to 20 units, and then we move to 30 units, and then we move to 40 units, as the average cost starts to creep up. So we can connect these points and show our average cost of production. Note that average cost will typically decrease as we cover overhead, but then at some point, diminishing returns or decreasing marginal products are going to result in our average cost being dragged up. And in fact, the minimum of the average cost is exactly where the marginal cost curve crosses through it. It'll also be useful to think about costs in terms of their fixed and variable components. When we do this, we keep in mind that the total costs of production are made up of these two components, the total fixed costs and the total variable costs. The total cost of providing scans is divided between the fixed costs, which have to be paid regardless of whether there are any scans at all, and the variable costs, which represent the labor primarily of X-ray techs and others who operate the scheduling and other functions for the office. The total fixed costs we've assumed are $500 regardless of the level of production. Those are based on inputs which are not varied. The labor that is variable starts at 0 when the doors are locked and we are not serving any customers. And with the first person hired, perhaps total variable costs are just 100, and then move to 220 after 2 hired, 370, 620, and 1,000. Those total variable costs are increasing rapidly because we may be operating at times of the day that require higher compensation, or we may have to hire at a higher wage rate in order to attract the additional employees. We can now combine those together to get back to our original total costs, which were 500, 600, 720, 870, 1120, and $1,500.